All right, so with Hashem's help, we're going to start the Rambam today's the laws of mikvah. We're starting right away from the beginning of the halachas of mikvah, and the Rambam is going to first establish some of the basic parameters that one needs to know for the mikvah. Actually, those of us that use the mikvah, some of it, a lot of it is relevant. I also want to, because it's new, we don't go by the Rambam halachically. Some of it's even like different traditions, Svardik, Ashkenazic. So we can't actually paskin the halacha. We can't say the law from the Rambam, but most of it is the applicable, and it'll definitely give us a very good overview on the halachas on the law. So we're going to learn it together inside as we begin a new chapter. I think it's about 11. I think so. It's about maybe about 11 days, and we'll complete the entire topic of mikveh, and we'll all have a very good understanding of the laws of mikveh. Here we go. Hilchos Mikvah, the laws of mikvah. Hakdama Hilchos Mikvah mitzvahs asiyachas. There's one positive mitzvah in the Torah, right? Because there's prohibitions and there's positive mitzvahs. V'hi sheyitzval kol tami b'mei mikvah, that anyone who is impure should immerse himself in a mikvah. V'achkach yitar, and then he will become pure. So the Rambam, there's one mitzvah. The mitzvah is about a impure person submerging in a mikvah, becoming pure, and he's going to explain the rules, the regulations, and the details, and in these halachas. So the Rambam is very organized, starts it right away from the top, and explains to you step by step exactly to understand the basis of mikvah. So first of all, the source of mikvah. Called law number 1. I believe there's 12 laws in today's class. Start from the beginning. Number 1, kol atmein bein adam bein kelim, anything that became impure, whether it be people, or bein kelim, or vessels, bein shenitmu tuma chamura shel Torah, whether they became a biblical impurity, a very strong impurity that's clearly in the Torah, bein shenitmu tuma shel devrein, or there's impurities that the rabbis added on that a person is impure. Eilen tahara ela b'tfilah b'mayim hanikvim b'karka. The only way for them to regain their impurity is by going to a mikvah. And the way he describes a mikvah is a collected pool of water that's in the ground. So the only way they can become pure is by submerging themselves, biblical impurity, rabbinic impurity, a person that became impure, vessels that became impure. The only way for them to become pure is by going to the mikvah in a pool that's in the ground, and that will remove that level of impurity from them. Okay, so that is halacha number 1, the basis of what is the idea. Halacha 2 continues. Explain the basis of mikvah. Kol makim shnemer b'Torah, any place which you find in the Torah, as we learned in our Chumash class. Rechitzas basar, and the Torah says in the Torah, you should wash your flesh. Wash their flesh. Almost that sounds like you could even interpret it like a shower. The Ram is going to tell you it doesn't mean a shower, it means a mikvah. Or bechibus begadim, or a lot of times it also says, and they should wash their clothes. Like we learned in Chumash Vayikra, in the previous Chumash, we learned it a lot. You should wash your clothes and you should wash your flesh, minatuma, from impurity. Eine ella, what it means, the intention is, the Rambam is passing on the oral tradition, that whenever the Torah says those words, tfilas kol haguf mikvah, means that your whole body needs to be submerged in the mikvah. So wash your clothes, wash your body. What is it talking about? Doesn't mean take a shower. I guess some people maybe want to learn it. Maybe could say it. So that I'm saying no. Whenever the Torah explaining you the basis of where this mikvah thing comes from, wherever it says your body should be washed and your clothes should be washed, your body should be showered, laundered, your clothes should be laundered, or washing your body, it means going to the mikvah. And this, that it says by a zav, we're going to learn about different kinds of impurity that one goes to the mikvah for. And we're going to learn about the zav, which is a person that had an unhealthy emission, a male that had an unhealthy emission for 3 days in a row. Something was coming out. So we'll learn about that. We'll learn about this guy soon. Hold on to that. But the bottom line is the verse says, "V'yadav lo'shatav b'mayim," and he didn't wash his hands in the water. In other words, the guy who had the emission did not go to the mikvah. When it says his hands, the Torah's description of this guy is that his hands wasn't washed in water. Again, it doesn't mean hands. It means that he didn't go to the mikvah. Now, why does the Torah use the funny words to say hands, which means mikvah? That we're going to learn in a couple of halachas. Stay tuned. I will understand. It helps you define how one goes to the mikvah. The bottom line is it means that, and if you don't go to the mikvah, you don't become pure. And the same thing goes not just this guy who had a mission, any other kinds of purity, that he has to be submerged. And the Rambam says that even if one drop, a little finger, was outside, the tip of his finger, of his little finger, was not in the water when he's submerged, it's no good. He's not pure. And the Rambam saying, even though many of the details and nuances of these laws are tradition, they're passed down from tradition, not clearly in the Torah defining, I guess, all the details of mikvah, even though it's there. Still, the bottom line is the Torah says, it does say in the Torah, in Chumash Vayikra, in the third book, that he should go into water, and he will finish his impurity by the end of the day, and then he will become pure. So Binyan so there is some verse that discusses the idea of going to the mikvah, even though most of it is based on oral tradition, and Binyan and then when the Torah taught it in one topic, the idea of mikvah, we established it, built it up everywhere else, that every person needs to go to the mikvah to become impure. So mikvah is a staple, becoming impure. You see in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, they had a lot of mikvahs. Today, we know a woman has a nidah. It's applicable today. Many men go to the mikvah. Mikvah is the way that a person becomes pure. So that is the beginning of the Rambam's halachas as he begins to teach the laws of mikvah. This is to be completely submerged. And the verses, what they mean, they really mean a mikvah, a lot of it. That is how the Rambam starts off in halacha Aleph and Beis. Let's go on to halacha 3 and talk about the vessels. What about the vessels? So we're going to start in law number 3, talking about the vessels. All the vessels that became impure, almost all of them. Almost all of them have become pure. They became impure somehow. Put them in the mikvah and they become pure. Chutz, besides, there's one vessel that doesn't, or another one, we'll see in a minute, one or two. Chutz mekli cheres, besides a earthenware vessel, uklis chuchis, and a glass vessel, and also a mat are not purified in a mikveh. So mikveh could take care of all impurities, besides if you're an earthenware vessel, or you're a glass vessel, or you are a reed, a kind of a reed mat that's made out of reeds. Those three things are not kosher in a mikveh to make it pure. Why not? And I'm just going to explain. Let's start off with the earthenware vessel. The earthenware vessel, it says in the Torah, in Chumash Vayikra, that once it became impure, you need to smash it, which means the only way to take care of it is to smash it, meaning that you cannot put it in the mikveh because the mikveh won't help. The Torah clearly says, for some reason, the Torah established that earthenware vessels cannot be purified in the mikveh. The only thing you can do is break them. And he's going to say, even if you took the earthenware vessel, you affixed it and attached it to the ground, and you even put a nail through it to attach it to some other large utensil. You filled it up even with lime, or gefasis, or another kind of thing. You filled it up to stack it up. The Torah says it stays impure until you break it, until you smash it. It's going to stay impure. Now that is why the Torah clearly says. So, my friends, which is the one vessel that we established so far that cannot become pure? That is a earthenware vessel. Why? Because the Torah, for some reason, said the only solution to earthenware vessel is to break it. Now, what about glass? The rabbis, for whatever reason, said we're going to compare all glass vessels to earthenware vessels. It has similar texture, whatever, so on. Glass vessels are going to be considered as earthenware vessels. Material, whatever, is for whatever the reason the rabbi said. And therefore, now, whatever the halacha is by earthenware is a halacha by glass. And just like by glass, the Torah clearly says you can't purify it. The rabbi says the same thing will apply to glass, just like by earthenware vessels. Now, how did the mats? What about mats? It's an interesting reason that Rambam came up with. Why doesn't this work for mats made out of reeds, just regular mats? Why can't you put them in the mikvah? So the Rambam is going to analyze it in a logical way and teach us how mats are different kinds of impurity than other impurities. And because they're learned differently, they cannot have the same laws applied to them. Let's see. Hamapats, mats. They're not, a mat is not considered a utensil, a vessel. That receives other kinds of impurities. So in other words, this is going back to the previous topics we've had about what could become impure. And then there's different various kinds of impurities. Something could become impure. Why not? Because they don't have a receptacle. And being that they don't have a receptacle, they're not considered a vessel like a cup or a pot or something that has a receptacle. And therefore, they're not considered as similar to the vessels made out of wood that the Torah spoke about that are made with receptacles that become impure in the normal beginning way that other biblical impurities take place. Now, so why is a mat impure at all? Because they weren't included in the original impurities of the Torah. But because there's another kind of impurity the Torah reference talks about, which is that if something can be used as a bedding, and therefore it becomes and takes on the impurity of a midras, which is a kind of impurity that becomes impure because it becomes a basis, a bed, a couch, a chair for someone else, even though it doesn't have a receptacle like a vessel, it can't take on the impurity of midras. So the Torah says you're now impure. The Torah says you're not a receptacle. You can't take on the average, usual utensil impurities, but something that could be a couch, a cushion that someone could sit on, takes on the impurity of somebody being used as a cushion for a person. That makes it also the ability to become impure. And since it's kind of a new category of impurities, it's not the regular Torah category of what becomes impure and pure, which is it becomes impure because it's a receptacle and it becomes pure with the mikvah. It's kind of a new kind of impurity. The Fedish, and this one doesn't talk about this kind of impurity of someone sitting on a cushion, but that's not a receptacle, is not clearly told us in the Torah about what makes a pure and impure. And then it kind of came a new category, which we were not told all the details about how to make it pure again. It was only taught in the Torah that it becomes impure. It was learned out by kind of a ribuy, an addition, but it wasn't taught all the details as with all the other vessels. So lo yisrab l'tar b'mikveh wasn't taught the details of mikveh, which apply to other vessels, won't apply to him. Because the only things that the mikveh could make pure are things that the Torah clearly said fall under the category of the average vessel that could become impure and could become pure through a mikveh. This is kind of a new category, and therefore we don't have the applications of purity to it. The only way then for a mat to become pure again, you have this sheet or something that you want to maybe use. How can make it pure? Only through ripping it that it's small enough for that mat, less than 6 by 6 handbreadth, which makes it kind of unusable on the average situation, and therefore only that will make it pure. So very interesting. The Rambam established that earthenware vessels and glass vessels and mats are not going to become pure in the mikvah, but everything else, every other kind of vessel the Rambam established, as the Rambam is building the building over here, explaining the details, can go into mikvah. So as long as you're not earthenware, glass, and reeds, as we explained, you can be purified in the mikvah. Now let's go on to people. What about the different kinds of people? So the first one he's going to talk about is Azav, is the man who had an emission, unhealthy emission coming out of him three days in a row. Azav, ein leitara, will not have purity. A mikvah will not work for a zav either. Very interesting. So if you want to know, a mikvah doesn't work for everyone. And I know actually, we like a lot of men go to the mikvah. A mikvah won't work for a zav. Ela b'mayan only. It's interesting. There's something higher than a mikvah level, and that is called a mayan, a stream. Because the Torah says a mayan chayim. For some reason, this guy who had the emission as a kind of impurity that the mikvah cannot handle and can't purify him. So he has to go into a stream that's that's coming out of water, coming out of the ground, that's streaming from the ground, is the only thing. He needs a higher level than mikvah, greater power than a mikvah to purify him, which is a collection of water in one location. He needs to have water connected to a stream coming out of the ground. That's the only thing to purify this man. However, aval azava, but a woman that does see bleeding for 3 days, that wasn't near her period time. She saw it in between the month. And all the other kinds of impurities between Adam and Kalim, people or vessels, they can all immerse in the mikvah. So just like by vessels, there was an exception, glass, earthenware, and mats. By people, there's also an exception, and a zav, a man who saw an emission 3 days in a row that he's unhealthy, is an unhealthy discharge coming out of the man. Also, for him in people, the mikvah is not good enough. He needs to actually go to water that's attached to fresh water coming out of the ground. For halacha number 6, call chayvi tfilos. Now he's going to talk about when. Fine, very interesting. He's going to talk about, well, when do these people go to the mikveh? And he's going to say it depends actually on the person. So in other words, we know, like, do you have to wait till your day of impurities up and then go to the mikveh? Can you go to the mikveh the night before? Can you go during the day and then your impurities up at the end of the day? That is what he's going to establish now. And the next halacha kind of the timing of the mikveh. All people that are obligated to go to the mikveh that day that they become pure, they could go to the mikveh anytime during that day. So in other words, they don't have to actually wait till their impurity is over and then go to the mikveh at night following it. No, that day when they're supposed to become impure, even though they're not impure yet till nightfall, they can go to the mikveh sometime during the day. Except, that's the general rule. Chutz, from two people, menida, a woman who is an ida, the yeledas, or a woman who gave birth, though that want to go to the mikveh to become pure again after the woman had her period, and after she had a child, they need to go to the mikveh at night, right? Like, women, when do they go to the mikveh? They go to the mikveh at night. They don't go to the mikveh during the day. But you need to, like we learned about the laws of nida. So everyone else can go during the day. Nida's women that had their period, it's all blood, need to go to the mikveh at night. About carry, and so it's either option 1 was general impurities can go anytime during the day, and then when their night comes, then they're pure, but it could have gone anytime during the day. If you're a nida, if you're a woman who had a period, or yeledas, have to go at the night after. About carry, and a guy who had an emission one time, not an unhealthy discharge, but had an emission. A man also wants to be pure, who had an emission one time, regular emission, needs to go to the mikveh. He could go to the mikveh actually not just any time during the day or the following night. He could even go the night before, within that 24-hour period, that last day, he could go to the mikveh and then wait till the end of that to become pure. The person who had the emission to go to the mikveh at the time of the day, in from the beginning of the night before, like it says by the person who had the emission, as night is coming, he can go to the mikveh. And any time during that whole 24 period. They can go from the beginning of the night of that 20. So like, like halacha, sometimes you have the night precedes the day and the night already starts that period. So for the guy who had the emission to carry, he already could go to the mikveh at the beginning of the night, the 24-hour period, at the Erev Shemesh until the night the following day. Let's go on. So that is, law 6 is that there's 3 time periods about when a person goes to the mikveh, depending on the 3 categories you're in. Now he's going to talk about how you have to be dressed, what your body has to be like in the mikveh, right? Whoever is immersing has to do full immersion. His whole body has to be in the mikveh, and he should be naked at one time. So he should be completely undressed and go in full submersion. What if he has a lot of hair? So does his hair need to be in the mikveh? Are they considered part of his body? Or not yet. His whole head here has to be in the mikveh. The Torah considers your hair exactly like your body. So if your hair was floating or out of the mikveh, you had very long hair, you have not gone to the mikveh. Your entire body, including your hair, that Rambam explains, needs to be in the mikveh. What about if an impure person went with their clothes to the mikveh? Because we're telling you should be undressed. To submerge your body, you should be completely surrounded by the water. Also, the tefillah counts for the person. Why? Because the water will get inside the clothes. Some normal clothes, regular clothes that people wear, I guess if it's not too tight, the water can get in under your clothes. And therefore, even though you were wearing clothes, it will come saturated with water, the water will get behind it, and you'll be considered fully submerged. So too, if a woman who is a nida, who had her period, and she needs to go to the mikveh in order to be allowed to be together with her husband again, it's fine. She was wearing her clothes, it's fine. Again, this is not halachically today. This is the Rambam in writing the halacha, but I'm not. Some of these things, you have to learn the actual modern day Shulchan Aruch to understand how this applies. So that is halacha 6 Zayin, about 7, about how your body has to be. Now he's going to say it's very interesting. There has to be intent, kavana, to the mikveh for the mikveh to count. Like, could you just go swimming? Or do you need to have intent? Could you go swimming in a mikveh and that'll count? Or do you need to have intent? That's halacha 8. When you go to submerge, you need to have in mind and intent. I am doing this for the intent of going to the mikveh. But if you didn't, also, so he says, look, the mikvah will count in a certain aspect. So what do I mean certain aspects it'll count for? Some things yes, some things no. So one of the biggest reasons in the olden days why I won't go to the mikvah was in order to eat truma. So let's say a kohen would get the 2% donation from the Jew, which we spoke about in the laws of donations. That 2% would become very holy. For the kohen to eat it, he would have to eat it being pure, so he would have to go to the mikvah. If the kohen did not have in mind, he went swimming, says, oh, I went swimming this morning in a thing that was a mikvah, in a lake or something that counts as a mikvah. No, it doesn't count. He had to have kavanah. Unless there were certain people that said, I'm always going to be pure. I want to live my life as a pure person, not just when I eat the truma, even when I eat non-truma foods, I want to eat them in holiness and purity. Every time I eat, I'm going to make sure I have the mikvah experience. That going to the mikvah swimming would help as long as he was fully submerged, even if he didn't have intent, because he's not actually eating truma now. But to eat truma, you actually need to go to the mikvah. I think that's what I note here, that for a woman, period, it would also help too. It's specifically about a nida, specifically about truma, the 2% for the kohen, that one needs to have kavanah to go to the mikvah intent. I feel neither. Oh, here it is. I feel neither shatav like kavanah. Even a woman that did the tefillah went to the submersion of the mikvah without intent, or she fell into the water, or descended into water to cool lehaker. She went just to cool off, and this is like, oh, I cooled off. I don't need to go back to the mikvah. It's permitted. It's only the truma that when the kohen eats 2%. That he needs to actually have intent. Aval truma is a kachim, but for truma, for kachim, or even when the kohen wants to sacrifice, in a tahira actually kavana, they're not pure unless they submerge with the intent has to be there. Halacha test. If a person ties his hands and feet, and he sat in an irrigation canal, right? So there's an irrigation canal, water's coming out of the lake, whatever, and he sits there. He says, look, I know you didn't, what position should you be in? It's not the ideal position to be in to become pure in the mikveh. Your hands were tied or so on. It's okay as long as we know for sure that you were completely submerged under the water, even though you were tied, whatever, the water completely surrounded you, you're pure. Now he's going to talk about how not to act, etiquette. To someone who jumps into the mikveh. It's magun, it's reprehensible because this is a mitzvah, this is something holy. We just spoke about intent. Don't jump into mikvahs. And even something interesting, someone who dunks twice, it's also reprehensible. Now we know that the custom is many people today do go to the mikvah more than once. This seems to be talking about, and some of the notes here are that someone who is playing games, kind of like jumping up and down to play games in the mikvah. Or maybe one of the commentators write that there wasn't enough water in the mikvah and you're making the water go out and now there's not enough left. You shouldn't be jumping and you shouldn't be submerging for no reason, for no intent to play games. Or someone tells his friend, place your hands on me, like they're playing a game. In the mikvah, it's disgusting. You have to have intent, was the last halacha. And the halacha test, halacha number 9 is, the law number 9 is that also you shouldn't be playing games, you have respect in the mikvah. Now we go to a very interesting question. We're saying that we need to be completely submerged. Where does the water need to go? Does it have to go up my nose? Does it have to go in my mouth? Does it have to go, if someone has flaps in their body or so on, does it have to go in the flaps? Like how careful do I have to be? So that's obviously interesting. Allah was saying you have to be completely submerged. And let's learn inside. Beis hastarim, ubeis hakamatim. Parts in the mikvah, the beis hastarim and the beis hakamatim, non-visible portions or creases in the person's body, actually don't need the water to go there. Their body's creased, but they were completely submerged. Did the water get into every crease? No, the water does not need to go into every crease. Now he brings the verse that I started off with the Rambam. The Rambam started off with, he's saying, how do I know? Because it says you have to make sure that your hands are in the water. And that means to say, it only has to be the revealed limbs of a person that generally a person sees. That's what has to be in the water, teaching us that if you had a person had creases that the water did not go in because of the creases, you're fine. You don't have to start stretching in every direction in the mikvah and so on. If there's creases there, you're still kosher. And within from the verse, I'm saying that you have to make sure your hands are in the water. Nevertheless, it's a very interesting law now. Even though the water doesn't have to go within the creases, the creases still have to be that if water could get there, in theory, if you stretched in the right way. And nothing should be blocking it. Fascinating. Therefore, the rabbis say, that's why the woman a man, it says that she teaches his wife when she's going to the mikvah that she should clean the creases, even though the water doesn't need to get in the creases. The water theoretically has to be able to get to the creases, and that's why the woman has to make sure to even, let's say there's creases in her body, to clean out and make sure there's nothing blocking, even though the water's not going to get there, since if she would stretch in the right way, the water would get there, she would be able to be completely submerged, the mikvah would count. I think, but I'm going off memory here, I don't know if this is correct, and very interesting, the women clean their teeth very well when they go to the mikvah. Now their mouths are shut, their mouths are not open. Well, why do they have to make sure that there's no chicken or meat stuck? Right, there's a question even if a woman could eat chicken before she goes to the mikvah night because it has pieces and it could get stuck in her teeth. But I thought her mouth's shut anyway. She doesn't open her mouth. So I think I believe this is the answer here. Even though the hidden parts of your body don't need to be in the mikvah, but they cannot be anything blocking them that if the water went there, it wouldn't be completely submerged. So therefore, I think even chicken in between your teeth, even though your mouth is shut, is no good because it has to have the ability that if water would go there, it would be able to touch everywhere around it. Therefore, the creases in the body also need to be cleaned to make sure there's nothing else there, so that had the creases been in a way that the water could get to, they would be able to be completely submerged. How should a woman be in the mikvah? The way she stands normally, or when she weaves, or when she nurses her child as bina, any of those positions are fine for the woman to go to the mikvah. Halacha 11. Now, he's going to tell you that when a woman goes to the mikvah, you have to be very careful not to go. In other words, since your body needs to be completely submerged, you can't be in a scary situation which you're going to run quickly and you're going to be afraid, you're going to be embarrassed where you are because you're not going to be submerged in the full way. Let's see inside. A woman should not immerse in a harbor. Because she's embarrassed of Ne'ir and the people of the city, and she won't submerge completely correctly. So in other words, there's people there, I think like in Hawaii, I believe that before they had a mikvah, people did go to the ocean. They had to do it in a very careful way, have some kind of cloth around them, because if you're in an area which you're a little scared that somebody might see you, especially you're not dressed, you're going to do a quick taival, a quick immersion, and you're not going to be kosher because you're not going to do it correctly. So the Rambam is telling you the person has to make sure to do it in a location where they're comfortable. Whatsoever in that ocean, that harbor situation, if they put a cloth around her, something like that, she's allowed to go to the mikvah in a harbor. So maybe in such a case, they can go in an area where she knows no one's going to see her, so the harbor is fine. She shouldn't go on some kind of a basket or some earthenware vessel, which is uncomfortable, because she's scared she's going to fall, going to get hurt. And the mikvah won't count, won't be acceptable, because again, it has to be a comfortable environment which the person could look and take their time and be calm and make sure that they're completely comfortable in order that the tefillah is completely submerged correctly. And finally, halacha yud beis, the final halacha, it's a long halacha in the Rambam. He's going to talk about what things create a chatzitza, create a separation that are considered that you're not completely submerged. So like some of the famous questions would be nail polish, or is nail polish considered a thing that separates you from the water and therefore you're not completely submerged? That's the question we have. So he's going to discuss that now over here. And by the way, like for example, I'll give you an example with what's going to come to the topic here. If a painter, like when you wash your hands for a meal, your hands have to be completely clean. Now we know women have nail polish on their hands when they wash their hands for bread. It's not considered a separation for like when we wash for hamotzi or something like that, right? But they take off the rings maybe or so on. But like when halachas, when you learn the halachas of washing your hands, a painter who has paint on his hands, still kosher to wash his hands in that way because he always has paint in his hands, and therefore it's not considered a disturbance. So let's see the halacha inside. A man or a vessel that are being submerged should have nothing separating between them and the water. The vessel or the person has to be completely submerged. And if there's anything that is separating, intervening between them and the water, you're going, for example, they had some dough, so somebody was baking dough, and then they went to the mikvah and they have dough on their hands, or they have some mud that's clinging to the hand of the person. Or there's some dough left over on the vessel. You know, like when we go to taival our dishes, you have to get the goo all off it and stuff because it's not considered submerged sometimes when it has these sticky stickers on it. And there's a tamik shahaya, the vessel or the person is impure as they were. And the immersion doesn't count because you weren't completely submerged because you had dough or dirt, or mud on you. Now, according to the Torah, biblically, when you see the rabbis added a restriction, the original biblical law, what is considered an invalid immersion because someone has an intervening substance there, it's if the item was roiv ha'adam, covering the majority of the person, or roiv ha'keli, or this additional substance was covering the majority of the vessel, then biblically, then the immersion doesn't count. That's point one, in order for it not to count biblically. Point two, another thing is that it also only bothers us if he doesn't like dough or mud, he doesn't want it there, and that's what's blocking most of his body, then the immersion doesn't count. But let's say something like nail polish, similar to that which they want there, then according to the Torah, it would count. So Torah has two, sets the bar very low. In other words, it's saying what is considered intervening substance. A, it has to be most of your body, most of the vessel, and B, it has to be something you don't want there. But if you don't care, you're happy to have it there. Doesn't care, it's there, it's not there. And that substance is not considered an intervening object. And even biblically, even if it's covering most of your body, as long as you want it there, you don't care if it's there or not. It's not a disturbance. You wouldn't be considered an intervening object. The same thing goes biblically. If it wasn't covering majority of your body, just less than the majority, less than half, and even if you don't want it there, it's fine according to the Torah because it's not covering most of your body. However, Medivrei Seifrim rabbinically, they said anything that is intervening object. If you don't want it there, also like tefillah, it does not count. Even though it's only on the lesser part of your body, and the rabbis decreed it shouldn't be on your body at all, because even if it's on the lesser body, it might come to be on the majority of your body, and therefore the tefillah, the mikvah won't count. So the rabbi said, we're not going to play games, even though the Torah allows it to be on the lesser part of your body, the smaller amount of your body, we're going to say nothing at all. So the God forbid someone doesn't make a mistake and allowing it on the smaller part of his body, then has it on the majority of his body. Now, anything that was anything that substance that does create this division. If it was a majority of your body, the mikvah doesn't count to the person. Even if it's a substance that he doesn't care that it's there. Again, the rabbis decreed on that too. Because even though the Torah says it's fine because you don't care that it's there, but we're going to be concerned about the people that are concerned about it. Nimtzah comes out that if it's on the flesh of a person, or on a vessel, a thing that does create a division, like dough, or tar, someone had tar in themselves, like that. I feel even the drop as a what's it called, seed, a mustard seed. So that's very small. When he cares about it, the mikvah doesn't count. So in other words, even though the Torah says it could be on up to the little, on less than half of your body, it doesn't matter. Rabbi said it's not okay. You don't like it there, you don't want it there, even if it's as tiny as a mustard seed, the mikvah doesn't count. But if you don't care about it being there, also like tefillah, so it has two leniencies. A, you don't mind that it's there, and B, it's also not on the majority of your body. It's on the smaller part of your body. Also, the tefillah in the mikveh counts because it's two rabbinics. We're not going to make you worry about two rabbinic stringencies. Unless he does it, unless it's on the majority of his body, or most of the vessel, or most of the person. Like we explained. That is the end of today's class on